We never imagined the response we'd get. Family after family, right across Australia, hundreds of you concerned, confused and worried about how your elderly relatives are being cared for. That response followed a report revealing some nursing home residents are being fed on meals costing just $6 for a whole day. And that certainly hit a very raw nerve, particularly when it was pointed out that prisoners receive food costing more. Well, Stephen from Queensland was just one of those people who contacted us. Take a listen.
Look, my father-in-law's in care and he's 93 years old, he has dementia. And the level of care that he's actually currently receiving is not up to scratch, and we've had to actually go to the Age Commission to complain about that care. Things like basically, changing bandages, even the food that he's given. He doesn't have teeth, so his food is quite critical. Constant, they'll give him things that he just possibly couldn't eat. Time and time again, we have to keep reminding them what their duty of care is for him.
So, is enough being done to ensure our elderly are properly cared for in nursing homes? We'll have more of your comments in just a moment, but first joining us is the CEO of Leading Age Services Australia, Sean Rooney, and Paul Versey, Policy Coordinator of Combined Pensioners and Superannuants Association of New South Wales. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Sean, if I could start with you, that was obviously a damning report across the media yesterday. A right of reply, how would you respond to that?
Look, I think the starting point is to understand there's a range of factors that contribute to the whole issue around food in residential aged care. The first thing to note is that as people age, it's understandable that many of them will experience a loss of appetite, and that can contribute to the risk of malnutrition. So in that context, residential care providers are acutely aware of that, and so they are compelled through the equality standards to put in place appropriate meals that provide adequate nutrition and hydration that enables a good quality of care to be delivered. Now, when you unpack the costs of that $6 a day versus $8 a day, etc., there's some things to really take into account. The first thing to note is that the prices we're talking about are wholesale prices, not retail prices. This is not what you pay when you go to a Woolworths checkout. The second thing is, when preparing food in these facilities, these are commercial scale operations. This is not your family kitchen. The other thing to note is that the meals that are provided, more often than not, given that the calorie requirements of older people in residential care is often a lot lower than your average, the actual portion sizes are smaller. And then finally, it's not just food. There are supplements that are provided that isn't included in that costing, and those supplements are more often than not prescribed by a GP to ensure that there is adequate nutrition and deal with conditions such as people that have dysphagia, which is problems swallowing, or people with dental issues, etc. So there are a number of elements. To be honest, it was a bit disingenuous to then go and compare what happens in a residential care facility to what happens in a prison. Totally different requirements in terms of calorie needs for the predominantly male population that is relatively mobile and fit and healthy in that system versus predominantly female over the age of 80 or 85 who don't live particularly active lifestyles. So, we would argue that there's a lot of things to be looked into rather than just grabbing a $6 a day.
So you'd have no qualms about eating food at any...
I've eaten residential care facilities. I've been to many facilities. I've sat down and eaten their food. I've met with the residents and had food with them. It is fair to say that the systems and process in place with regards to the quality standards, which all have to be met in order to have a menu plan and meal plans provided in residential care facilities. They need to be provided by a dietitian. They're delivered by hospitality professionals. The nutrition content is measured. You have a number of other protocols in place that enable the people who are providing the care to monitor the weight of the residents. There is a number of systems and processes tied to the quality standards that actually deliver that appropriate nutrition.
All right, Paul, you're in contact obviously with a lot of relatives of people in aged care facilities. Is there an issue with malnutrition?
There's certainly an issue with malnutrition, among other things, in aged care. One of the most telling things that people do is to bring in food for their relatives who are in residential aged care because they are so unhappy with the type of food and the quality of the food that is supplied.
Sorry to interrupt, what sort of percentage would be having to supplement and bring in the additional food, do you think?
Well, this is anecdotal evidence. Obviously, the people that ring us have a problem with aged care. So we hear about that in isolated cases, I guess. But it does point to complaints about the food not being attractive, so people will not eat enough. But also food is sometimes not appropriate. People can't eat it, can't swallow it. Sean referred to that. And also, in many cases, people with dementia who do not eat of their own accord are not assisted appropriately and with sufficient staff to make sure that they get their meal.
All right, well, the standard of food is actually one of several complaints about aged care facilities, and we asked our viewers at home what they thought about the treatment of elderly generally, and here's what some of them have had to say. Judith Lay said she thinks it's an absolute disgrace treating the elderly in this manner. Certainly needs investigation at the top level with inspectors employed to constantly check these facilities. Aged care worker Judy Stanfield said, I have just retrained into aged care and I'm horrified by the treatment of our elderly. They are physically well cared for, but in facilities they are not people. They're a set of fundable tasks contained within time frames. It's undignified and it's inhumane. Jenny Lee added, I work in aged care and I love my job. I guess our residents are fortunate. They all get healthy, edible meals every day. I do think aged care does need to be properly regulated to make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen. The elderly are vulnerable and we need to make sure they always have the kind of care they deserve. And Dale Carruthers said, my father spent the last 5 months of his life in an aged care facility and the food and care he received was absolutely fantastic. There was no concerns in any way. Some facilities are extremely profit-driven. Sean, so as we know, some people are having good experiences, and we should mention that anyone who chooses to be a carer should be absolutely supported and congratulated. It's a tricky field. Is the regulation adequate? It would seem from those responses that it's absolutely not.
Look, I think we have a relatively good system, but a relatively good system can always do better. It's fair to say that we all want the same thing. What Australia as a country needs is an aged care system that provides accessible, affordable, quality care and services for older Australians, and that must be delivered by a high-performing, respected and sustainable aged care industry. Now, in order to deliver that, there are a range of things that need to get right in terms of the settings, and there's been a number of independent reviews conducted over the last 12 months or so that have found that the current system, with its current settings, whilst adequate, needs to change, needs to transform in order to deliver those outcomes. And that transformation needs to cut across things like the accessibility, so supporting older Australians to access services better. The funding of the system also needs an overhaul, as does I think increased scrutiny on the application and interpretation of the quality standards to ensure there is consistency and continuous improvement.
Paul, we're an ageing population. Where is the biggest area of concern as far as you see it?
I think it's in the area of regulation and staffing. The regulation of aged care, particularly residential aged care, is inadequate. You just have to look at these nutrition studies, which consistently find that 40 to 70% of people are malnourished in residential aged care, yet there were only 38 nursing homes over the past 5 years which were found failing by the regulatory system. So obviously a system that allows that kind of failure is broken and needs to be replaced.
Yeah, the checks and balances are not working.
Absolutely.
Just finally, in the event of someone watching this who has concerns about someone they know and love in an inadequate aged care facility, what should they do?
Well, they should work hard to get them into a good one, and they're hard to find. The first step would be to lodge an official complaint so that it is in the system. That might work, it might not work. But the most important thing you can do is to bring in your own care, to make sure that your relative sees a GP or a dentist or both, that those things are looked after, and you really need to be on the ball. You need to be there for them in the home if the home is not very good.
All right, sounds like we've got a long way to go in this area. Paul and Sean, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you very much, Georgie. Yeah, let's go to some breaking news.